And so, God, I just pray all these things in your name. Amen. You know, life is full of decisions, isn't it? We make thousands of decisions each and every day. You may have heard statistics like this before, but we make, on average, the average person makes 35,000 decisions every day. That's a lot of decisions. Some of them are conscious decisions. Some of them are unconscious decisions. But today, I'm going to ask you, maybe some of you for the first time, to make a decision. And the decision that I'm going to ask you to make is the most important decision you will ever make. It's the most important question you will ever be asked. And we're going to begin reading our story today in John chapter 11, verse 3. And we're going to be looking at the story of Lazarus. If you're just joining with us, we're in a sermon series called Restored, the Path to All Things New. And we're looking at the life of Jesus and journeying on this path to restoration, to the cross, and then to 3 days later when Jesus rises from the dead. And so we are making our way through the New Testament, looking at different gospels and different accounts and different stories of Jesus' life, all leading us to the cross and to Easter. But today we're talking about a story that happens just before Jesus goes to the cross, about a man named Lazarus. Everybody say Lazarus. Oh, we got to be better than that. Let's wake up. Lazarus. Lazarus, there we go. He lived with his sister, Mary and Martha. You may remember Mary and Martha, as there's a story that there is about one of them's working and the other one's sitting at Jesus' feet, if you remember that story. Also Mary, this is the Mary that came before Jesus and dumped the perfume on Jesus' feet. And so Mary and Martha and Lazarus, they have a great relationship with Jesus, but then Lazarus gets sick. Everybody go, dun, dun, dun. Dun, dun, dun. Lazarus is sick. It doesn't say what he's sick with, but we know that he is sick to the point where Mary and Martha have to reach out to Jesus. We're going to begin reading John 11, verse 3. So the two sisters sent a message to Jesus telling him, "Lord, your dear friend is very sick." Lord, your dear friend is very sick. Mary and Martha called Jesus. They said, "Jesus, we need you." They had faith in Jesus. They believed in Jesus. And there was a problem, so they called on Jesus. That's something we can apply to our lives right there, isn't it? That if we have a problem, we can be like Mary and Martha, and we can call on the name of Jesus. You know, I know a name that's pretty awesome. There's a song we're going to sing about a name. And on Easter, we have a new song that we're going to do, and I want to intro it. So at the end of our service today, we're going to be playing the new song. And if you're, it's hard to learn a new song sometimes. Sometimes the first time you hear it, you just kind of listen to it, and you just kind of worship when you're listening. But when it comes to Easter, I want full on everybody worshiping with this song, because it's a powerful song. And so I'm going to intro it to you. The first part, it goes, "I know a name that can silence the roaring waves." We talked about that, right? We've looked at the stories of that. Jesus, in one word, can silence the roaring waves. "I know a name that can empty out a grave. I know a name, it's the only name that saves, and it's worthy of all our praise." And so the song starts with saying, hey, I know a guy. I know a name. But then it switches it, and it starts talking to Jesus, and it says, "I call you Jesus. I call you healer, risen and reigning in power. Something comes out of the grave every time I call you Jesus." That's not the whole song. There's other verses and stuff, but that's the main part of the song. Like I said, we're going to be singing that at the end. But the two sisters, Mary and Martha, they know a guy. His name is Jesus, and he's got power. And so they call him. But when Jesus, verse 4, but when Jesus heard about it, he said, "Lazarus' sickness will not end in death. No, it happened for the glory of God, so that the Son of God would receive glory from this." That's kind of a strange response. You'd think Jesus would be like, "Oh man, my friend is sick, let's go heal him." But Jesus doesn't do that, because he has a purpose here that Mary and Martha aren't even aware of, that Jesus knows more than Mary and Martha do. In our lives, Jesus knows more than we do. And there's a purpose to Lazarus' sickness. Verse 5, so although Jesus loved Martha, it wasn't from a lack of love of Martha, Mary, and Lazarus. He loved them very much. But he stayed where he was at for the next 2 days. This is interesting. This is key. Why? There's a reason. I'm going to tell you in a second. But it stayed for 2 days. Finally, he said to his disciples, let's go back to Judea. Now, the disciples at first are like, Rabbi, these people in Judea, they want you to die. They want to stone you. So there was like a actual fear element to the disciples going back to Judea. This wasn't an easy thing for them to do. But sometimes Jesus doesn't respond like we would think he would respond. But Jesus' timing is always perfect. It's always perfect. He always has the right time, and we've got to trust him in that. And so he says, let's wait. And then he says, okay, let's go. And the disciples are like, no, we don't want to go. People are trying to kill you. And then Jesus gives them a metaphor, and then they don't really understand it. And so Jesus says it super clear at the end of 14. He says, Lazarus is dead. Everybody go, dun, dun, dun. And for your sakes, I'm glad I wasn't there, for now you will really believe. Come, let's go see him. Come, let's go see him. It was a full day's journey to Bethany. And when Jesus arrived at Bethany, he was told that Lazarus had been dead in the grave for 4 days. 4 days is a long time to be dead in a grave. That's important. Jesus had he had raised other people from the dead thus far. I think there was 2 or 3 people that he raised from the dead thus far. This one is different, though, in the sense that Lazarus wasn't just recently dead. He had been dead for 4 days. In Jewish culture, they believed that the soul of the person would hover near the body for up to 3 days, hoping to re-enter the body. But after the 3rd day, when the body began to decompose, the soul would no longer have any connection to it. So Lazarus is dead. This reminds me of Princess Bride. Anybody? The movie? Come on. You know the story where Wesley, he gets tortured to death, and then his 2 friends find him. They bring him to Miracle Max, right? And Miracle Max is retired, and he's like, I don't do miracles, and but he ends up getting the puffer thing out, and he's going like this, and he's like, he's not really dead. He's just mostly dead. And he's got the chocolate pill and all that. Lazarus isn't mostly dead. He's dead, okay? I'm making my point. He's dead. He's dead, 100%, not asleep. He is dead. Okay, enough of the dead. Whew. Verse 21. Martha says to Jesus, Lord, if only you had been there, my brother would not have died. But even now, I know that God will give you whatever you ask. In the middle of her grief, in the middle of her sadness, she's probably questioning herself. She's probably wondering, should I have gone and got Jesus? Could I have done anything different? Could I have done anything better? But even in the middle of her grief, she shows tremendous belief in Jesus. And then Jesus tells her, he says, your brother will rise again. Your brother will rise again. Now, this wasn't an uncommon thing to say. This would be a quite common thing that people would say to one another when someone passed to comfort them, because a lot of the Jews at this time believed that there would be, in fact, a resurrection at the end where God would raise both the righteous and the unrighteous to judge them. And so the Jews did believe that. The Pharisees did, but the Sadducees did not. So there's a big difference. If you've ever heard the Pharisees and Sadducees and you've always wondered what's the big difference, Pharisees believed in a resurrection. Sadducees did not. So anyways, Martha responds by saying, yes, he will rise when everyone else rises at the last day. But then Jesus says something profound. Jesus says something jaw-dropping. Jesus says something life-changing, life-altering. He says in verse 25, Jesus looks at Martha and he says, I am the resurrection and the life. Anyone who believes in me will live even after dying. Everyone who lives in me and believes in me will never die. Whoa! That is powerful. And then he looks at Martha and he asks this question. And this is the moment. This is the question. This is that point of decision where I said that you're going to have to make a decision today of if you're going to be able to. What is that decision? It's right here. He looks at Martha and he says, do you believe it? And he's looking at you this morning asking you the same thing. Do you believe that Jesus is the resurrection and the life. That those that believe in Jesus will not die. See, belief, definition, is a mental acceptance that something is true even without definitive proof or evidence. You know, I think it's more than that, though. I think if you look at the Greek word, pistet, I don't know how to say it, Pisteuo. Okay, if you look at the Greek word, it means to believe or to have faith in or to trust. And I think it's important to note that the word believe is a verb. It's an action word. You got to do something with it. You can't just, in order to have belief, it's an action word. It's a doing word. It's an active choice that we get to make. And Jesus asks us, do you believe? And Martha responds, I love her response. She says, yes, Lord. She told him, I've always believed you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one who has come into the world from God. The next verse. When Jesus, actually, we're not going to go to that verse yet. Hold up. Yeah, we are. When Jesus saw her weeping and saw the other people wailing with her, a deep anger welled up within him, and he was deeply troubled. This is another interesting moment. You could do like a whole sermon series on the fact that Jesus had emotions, that Jesus felt the same emotions that we feel, that he had anger, that he had sadness, that he had pain. And some scholars will suggest that anger isn't directed at the mourners in the story, but actually at death itself. That he is mad at death for the suffering that it causes other people. Jesus knows exactly what he's about to do, but he still has compassion for the people. But I love that Jesus does not let his emotions prevent him from action. And he says, where have you put him? Now, if this was a movie, the music would change here, okay? Jesus goes from, he's angry, he's mad, people are crying, and he goes, where did you put him? And he looks off into this is the moment where the Jesus is going to go to battle against death itself. He's going into the ring. He's going to fight it. And we're going to see a battle that's going to be taking place here. It's just a cool moment when Jesus says, where have you put him? And then they told him, Lord, come and see. Then Jesus wept. It's the shortest verse in the Bible. If you need to memorize a verse this week, then Jesus wept. You all just can memorize it right now. Then Jesus wept. But the people standing nearby said, see how much he loves him. And once again, it's not because Jesus is powerless against death, but he feels the weight of the human grief and the human suffering, and he has this emotional response. And Jesus, he feels the pain of the people there, and I think he feels our pain too. But he gets to the tomb, and he's mad. He's still mad, and he says, let's roll the stone. So they roll the stone out of the entrance, and then Martha says, are you sure? Because he's been dead for 4 days, and bodies that are dead for 4 days are really stinky. And are you sure, Jesus? And Jesus looks at and says, didn't I tell you that you would see God's glory if you what? Believed. If you believed. So they rolled the stone aside. Jesus looked up to heaven, and he said, Father, thank you for hearing me. You always hear me, but I said it out of loud for the sake of all those people standing there so that they would believe you sent me. I'm going to pause the story right here for now. I'm not going to tell you. If you know the story, you know the story, but I'm going to pause it right now, and we're going to come back to what happens at the end of the story at the end. But believing is a word I want to focus on today. And believing isn't just a one-time thing. A lot of us think it's either black or white. It's either I believe or I don't believe. I'm either a believer or an unbeliever. And a lot of times we put it into those two black and white categories. But I believe that there is if once you choose to accept Jesus, once you choose to believe Jesus, there are levels of belief. That you can always believe Jesus more. And no matter if you've been a Christian for 50 years or 5 seconds, you can believe Jesus more today. And today I want to give you some practical things, some practical ways that you could increase your belief in Jesus, that you could believe in Jesus some more. There's a dad in a story, it's an earlier story where there's a father that comes to Jesus with a demon-possessed son, and he says, have mercy on us, help us if you can. And Jesus says, what do you mean if I can? Anything is possible if a person believes. But then the point I really want to draw out of this story is the father instantly cries out, I do believe, but help me overcome my unbelief. I believe, but I still have doubts. I believe, but I still need help. Some of you believe, but you can always be helped to believe more, okay? So that's where we're going. You can always believe more. Realistically, I can't make anybody to believe anything today. No matter how eloquent I am, no matter how I speak or what I say, ultimately, it's your decision. It's your choice. And God gives you the free will to decide whether or not you want to believe or not to believe. But if you are willing, I think there are some things that we can do to increase our belief. And like I said, there's 4 things this morning that I want to share with you on how to increase belief. And some of you may have seen this analogy before, maybe others of you haven't. But this right here is a chair, okay? Do I believe I can sit in that chair and not fall down? I don't know. Can I sit in that chair? Is it going to hold me up? I have my doubts. I don't know. How can we increase our belief in something? Well, the first thing is we can research it. We can study it. We can learn it. We can use our brains. We can use our intellect. And so if I'm questioning this chair, if I'm wondering, can I sit in this chair? Is this chair going to really hold me up? What could I do? Well, I could get on Amazon. I could try to find it, look up some reviews. I could research the metal. I could find out if it's aluminum or what kind of metal it is. I could see if, where was it produced? Where was it manufactured? Was it U.S. made? Was it foreign made? There's so many questions that I could begin to ask as I'm looking to see, do I want to believe in the chair? And you can use your brain. Same thing you can do with your walk with Jesus. It's okay to ask questions. It's okay to use your intellect. It's okay to do some research. There are so many friends and family that I've seen. I just talked with a guy just this week who said he was watching some videos. He'd been Christian for years. Watching some videos, though, on Amazon. I can't remember the name of them, but if you want them, I'll give them to you. But he was watching them, and he said, my belief just went through the roof because he began to see how God created the world. And it was incredible. Do research. It's okay. Use your brain. Use your intellect. How do you increase your belief in Jesus? Study it. Research it. We could spend hours researching our story today if we wanted to. I could talk about the historical consistency. I could talk about the eyewitness accounts or the timing of the event or the motivation of the gospel writers. I could talk about the lack of contradicting evidence. But there's nothing wrong when we use our intellect to increase our belief. The second thing that we can do is we can see God's glory. We can see God's glory. And with the chair analogy here, we can test it out. We can say, I don't know if it's going to hold me. You like these? These are my wife's. I'm going to say, show me. I want you to prove it. Can you hold weight? It held it. That's awesome. It held it. We can see God's glory. We can see if the chair can hold some weight. Seeing God's glory increases our belief, but we're blessed if we believe without seeing. I think it's interesting that Jesus says to Martha, you would see God's glory if you believed. It started with belief, and then she gets to see God's glory. It doesn't always work that way, but doubting Thomas, we're not going to get deep into the story of doubting Thomas, but there's a moment where Thomas doesn't believe that Jesus really rose from the dead. He said, I want to see the holes in his hands. I want to see the holes in his feet. And so Jesus shows him that sign. And he gets to have an encounter with him, but Jesus looks at him and says, you believe because you have seen me, but blessed are those who believe without seeing me. The disciples had a huge advantage. They got to see all kinds of miracles. They got to see Jesus walk on the water. They got to see Jesus heal people. We get to believe without seeing sometimes. And that's okay because it says we will be blessed without seeing. Dr. David said it this way. He said, we need to focus upon moving closer to God in holiness. And the closer we move to God in this way, miracles will just begin to take place. Because the closer we get to God, the more his power can flow into us and through us. So is it wrong to ask for a sign? To say, God, show me. Man, when I'm driving in the Costco parking lot, and I say, Lord, if you are real, I need a parking spot. Is it wrong to pray that prayer? If you don't believe and you pray that prayer just to try to catch Jesus, he's pretty strong against the Pharisees for doing that. Don't do that, okay? But if you are having doubts and you choose to ask a question of God and say, if you are really there, I don't think there's anything wrong with asking it. Just be aware that sometimes God answers it and sometimes he doesn't. You can't just say, you can't control God. You can't demand a test from God. You can't say, God, I need you to open up the parking spot or I'm not going to follow you. You know, those kind of prayer, those ultimatums are not okay. But what is okay to say, wake up every morning this week and say, God, I want to see your power. You can pray that prayer. You can say, God, would you reveal yourself to me this week? God, I want to see more of you this week. God, if you are real, would you show yourself to me? You can pray that prayer every morning. And I believe God, he may or may not. I'm not going to say that he will because he does what he wants to do. But we can ask that question. We can pray that question. There's a story. Robbie, he's here this morning right over here. He gave me permission to share a part of his testimony, but there was a moment in his life where he went up into the woods with a gun, not planning to come home. And in a moment of grief, in a moment of anger, in a moment of frustration, he cried out to God, screaming at God, saying, if you are real, would you show me a sign? Would you show me a sign? And in that moment, a shooting star goes across the sky, followed by another shooting star and another shooting star. There was 3 shooting stars back to back. And he gave his life to Jesus, and he's here this morning, and he got baptized. It's incredible. You're going to have to ask him for the full story because that was the very short version. But is it okay to ask for a sign? I think, yeah. I think it is. If you already believe, you might not need to ask for a sign. But a lot of the times when we ask for a sign, it does help us increase our belief. The next thing that we can do to increase our belief is we can hear stories about what Jesus has done in others' lives. Tom, can you come up here real quick? I'm calling you on the spot. Go ahead and sit in the chair for me. Because I don't know if it's going to hold me up. I don't know if the chair's going to hold me up, but I want to see the testimony of Tom. Oh, he sits in the chair. Awesome. You're good. Thank you, Tom. You can head back. I'm going to get Ben. Come on up next. I want to see another person. I don't really believe it. Come on. Come on. Come on. Chair held up, Tom. Let's see if chair holds up, Ben. Let's see. I want to hear the story. I want to see the test. Oh, chair held Ben. Excellent. You guys get the picture, right? That when you see someone else sit in the chair, my belief in the chair increases. When you hear the stories, when you hear the testimonies of what God has done in other people's lives, your belief can go up. Raise your hand if you have experienced the presence of God. My belief just went up because of the testimony. That's pretty cool. Raise your hand if you have a friend or a relative that's experienced a miracle. Wow. That's incredible. You know, it's okay to ask a friend a coffee and to say, why do you believe? It doesn't matter if you believe or don't believe or you have doubt or don't have doubt. When you hear the testimony of somebody else, it increases your belief, and we all need to increase our belief. And so make that part of our language. Make that part of our culture. Why do you believe in Jesus? And be ready for a response in that. Because when you share your testimony, it encourages other people's and it lifts up other people in their belief as well. There's a reason that Paul shared his testimony 3 different times in the Bible that's recorded. The last thing that we can do to increase our belief today is we can spend time with Jesus. I can spend time with the chair. I can feel it. I can hold it. I can touch it. I can make sure it's sturdy. I can look at it. But you sometimes, to increase your belief, you got to spend time with it. We got to spend more time with Jesus. When I was in 6th grade, dated my first girlfriend, Brittany Grimes. We were at the dance. My friends dared me to ask her out. I walked over. I said, do you want to be my girlfriend? And she said, yeah. Do you want to dance? I said, no, my mom's picking me up. I got to go. And then I proceeded for the next 3 months to talk to her twice in 3 months because she terrified me. I did tell her I liked her hair once. And then she cheated on me. True story, true story. Heartbroken little Rob in 6th grade. That's not why I tell the story, though. The reason I tell the story, though, is because some of your relationships with Jesus are like my 6th grade relationship with Brittany. You can't ask her out and then not spend time with her. You can't say, Jesus, I want to believe in you, but I'm not going to spend any time with you. I'm not going to sit in your presence. I'm not going to worship. I'm going to be so distracted with other things. Let's spend time with Jesus this week. Let's get to know him. Let's be with him, because when you're with the chair, it helps build my faith. See, I'm still, there's things that we can do to increase our belief. We can research the chair. We can look things up about the chair. We can test out the chair. We can see other people sit in the chair. We can be with the chair. But in order to believe, I have to sit in the chair. In order to believe, I got to say, you know what? I may not understand everything. I may not understand how, when everybody raised their hands, that they saw miracles. I may not understand how the Bible is inspired by God. I may not understand all of it, but you know what? I choose to believe. And you got to sit in the chair. So today is a day of decision. Jesus looks at Martha and he says, do you believe? And he looks at you today and says, do you believe? I can't believe for you. You have to decide it for yourself. It's only a choice that you can make. Will we put our faith, will we put our trust, will we put our hope in Jesus? You see, when we believe in Jesus, everything changes. When we believe in Jesus, everything changes. We can have more peace. We can have more joy. We can have more contentment. We can have more hope. When we believe in Jesus, our perspective begins to change on things, on issues that we're dealing with. Our perspective can change and we see things differently. When we increase our belief in Jesus, our desire to live the right way increases, because we believe in him more. So we want to live the right way. When we increase our belief, our compassion for others increases. When we increase our belief, our generosity and what we do with our finances increases. When we believe in Jesus, our confidence and our boldness to share our faith with others goes up. It increases. Our sense of gratitude and our sense of thankfulness increases. When we believe in Jesus, we have a purpose. When we believe in Jesus, we have a hope in eternity. See, Martha believed. She called. She said, Jesus, I know a guy. I'm calling it. And it didn't happen in her timing. It didn't. She wanted it to happen instantly, but Jesus had a different purpose. He had a different plan. But Jesus goes up to battle against death itself. And so we put ourselves back in the scene where the grave is in front, and he says, roll the stone away. Martha says, oh, but it's so stinky. And he says, yeah, but if you believe, you're going to see my glory. And then he goes, Lazarus, come out. And the dead man came out. His hands and his feet were bound in grave cloths, and his face was wrapped in a headcloth. And Jesus told them, unwrap him and let him go. Jesus has the power over death. Do you believe it? The Bible says the wages of sin is death. Sin is anything that separates us from God. It's when we know the right thing to do, but we do the wrong thing anyways. But the wages of sin, the thing that we all deserve, is death. But Jesus beat death. And the gift of God is eternal life. You see, this story of Lazarus, it foreshadows a day when Jesus will raise himself from the dead. He has the power over death, and he takes things that are dead and he brings them back to life again. Maybe you've been feeling spiritually dead recently. He calls your name today. And he says, come out, wake up, come alive. That's what Jesus does. Back to our song, I'm going to invite the band up. I know a name that can silence the roaring waves. I know a name that can empty out a grave. I know a name, it's the only name that saves, and it's worthy of all of our praise. I call you Jesus. I call you healer, risen and reigning in power. Something comes out of the grave every time I call you Jesus. If you want to stand up with us, we have a choice to make a decision to believe. Jesus is the resurrection and the life. Those that believe in him will never die. If you want to grab your connection card, we do this each and every week to respond to the truth of God's word. There's a lot of different boxes you can check on there. The boxes do change every week. If you do want to fill out the digital one, we do have that updated now, so that'll be changing every week as well. But the first box on there is maybe today is your decision day. You want to say this day is the day that you are deciding to say, I am choosing to believe in Jesus. And maybe you don't understand it, but you know that you can sit in the chair and you're going to try it. And if that's you, I want you to check that first box that says, I choose to follow Jesus. I choose to believe in Jesus. The second box on there is, I'm struggling to believe in Jesus. It's okay to admit. It's okay to say, I'm struggling. I'm having some doubts. Check that box. We'll pray with you. The third box is, I believe, but I need Jesus to help me with my unbelief. God, would you help me in my unbelief? And then the last one is I want to believe in Jesus more this week. Let's worship him. Let's sing it.